What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Pro vs. Pro and welcome to the Memorial Tournament. Justin, I know you've got like 100 million things going on in your life right now, including maybe going to the Stars playoff game tonight, but let's hear all about it. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It was just a fun week at the Colonial watching these guys play so local, and then, knowing the course is going to get blown up today, which is it's sad, but needs to be done. I think I'm disappointed they're not putting Bermuda in. They're going to go back to bent grass, but it's a great week. We got a ton going on, including the Stars game tonight. If we can somehow win this game, it's one of those epic comeback situations. So it's a fun ride. I do want to start off with a great story about we have an avid listener to our podcast that happens to be a member of my local club. I didn't know this, met him randomly, just got to talking. So last weekend we had our member at the club. Well, I'm scrolling through the list of just teams that I can buy in the Calcutta, right? And I see one team in a flight that they're both playing the white tees. So, we always talk about driving distance. Well, if they're getting a tee spot on everybody, and I know one of them is retired, or they're both retired, so they play a bunch of golf, and they're like the 10th flight or something. I was like, it's a 6-man match play. And I was like, man, I circled them, and I ended up buying them in the Calcutta. So I was like, perfect. I got a team playing up tees. They're going to buy half themselves. No big deal.
Right.
So I texted the guy that morning. He's like, no, man, one of my players, one of the guy, my partner, he's hurt. I don't even know if he can play. So they don't buy any of themselves. And then they go on to win. And I just love it. So Adrian, if you're listening, I appreciate you not buying half yourself. It was much needed, and I loved every second of it. So yeah, it was really fun. And I was like, yeah, you're going to have to listen to the podcast more. Maybe you can learn from buying half of people when you have a T-spot advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
It worked out good.
It's always funny when you play those events and you see something like, how come they get to play those tees? But that's awesome. What a great win for you.
Yeah, so it worked out really good. And like I said, just the fact that he listens to the show all the time and has been around for a while, listening since basically when we started, and then to do that. And I guess he had rolled his ankle like 2 days before and didn't know if he was going to be able to play. And like we say, beware the injured golfer. It's just a hard person to beat.
Yeah, I was also thinking, like, let's say he had bought his own team, bought half. Does he still kind of make all those pressure putts and get the win? Who knows? So
that's right.
Lots of layers there, but that's so fun. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was good stuff. But Memorial's great. This is like one of the best tests in golf. Pretty excited about this week. We're going to be able to kind of hint on some of the stuff that we talked about, Colonial and all that stuff. I want to, and we haven't talked about this backstage at all. So, I was huge on Jimmy Walker. 6,500. I just thought it was too good of a value. I didn't look his final DraftKings points total, but I think he finished about even par, like tied for 40th ish. So if you're building a lineup and you can get a 6,500 guy right now that is going to finish tie for 40th, is that good, or is that not what you're looking for?
It's so tough. Like it kind of gets to the question of, what is hitting value? And in some sports, like in NBA DFS, it's really easy to define value for a specific player. You can even do the same in baseball with pitchers. It starts to get a little bit tougher in like NFL, like, 1 week, 17 from your $4,000 receiver is going to be great. And then the next week, it's going to be 20 points behind all of the, mid-tier receivers who went off. So I think it really depends on the slate. I think for this past week at Colonial, that was plenty from Jimmy Walker because the 6 for 6 percentage was low. Even the 5 of 6 was low. So having, a 6,500 guy get through makes a huge difference, especially if you ended up pairing him with like Scotty Scheffler, who ties for second or ties for third, whatever it was. So it's so slate dependent, but generally speaking, I think as long as he makes the cut and does a pretty good job of scoring, it's going to be a really good performance for you.
Yeah, and so I just looked it up. He finished tied for 40th, 57 DraftKings points. And so we got into an interesting discussion of 57 DraftKings points from a 6,500 person I think works on hard golf courses. On easy golf courses, I don't think that and obviously, like, looking back at it, Carson Young was 6,300, and I think he finished a couple under par and scored quite a few more DraftKings points. So, there was some other options down there. It was an interesting conversation that we got into about being optimal and how do we find that optimal line. And if you could lock in a 6,500 guy at 57 DraftKings points that makes the cut, is that good enough? And I do think that on harder golf courses, I would take it. Obviously, like, a US Open or something like that, you'd be thrilled to death with a price like that and that kind of. But, I think that I would start if I haven't really looked much, but I have looked a little. But just leading into this week, if I can start my lineups with a 6,800 Alex Smalley and get a T40 out of them and I think that's, basically the baseline for him, I think I would be okay with that. Like, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And I love where this conversation's kind of going, because we talk about scoring and how a player can potentially outproduce his real life finishing position on the leaderboard in his finish on the DraftKings points leaderboard. Our birdie over expectation model is back, and it's better than ever. So it is back on site. You can go check that out. Maybe we'll put the link in the description, but pretty easy to find on the FTN Daily site or the FTN Bets site. So regardless of where you subscribe at FTN, you will have access to that awesome data. It's phenomenal for, birdie matchups on Prize Picks. And of course, it's incredibly useful on DraftKings, because basically, like, everything that we're trying to do is predict fantasy points. And the easiest way that we do that is we kind of proxy fantasy points with just how they're going to play in terms of just their, expected strokes gained or things like that. But then there's also that extra layer of birdies are so much more valuable than avoiding bogeys is from a fantasy point perspective. So, if one guy makes 4 birdies and 2 bogeys, and the other makes 3 birdies and 1 bogey, they both shot 2 under. But the guy who made 4 birdies is going to have a pretty significant advantage in fantasy points, and of course that then stretches if we're talking 6 birdies and 4 bogeys, that sort of thing. So definitely another avenue to us having an edge here at FTN. Really excited to have that data back and better than ever.
Sorry, I got a little one here. No, and you're right. I think this week's a little bit different because you're not going to get a ton of under par. I think historically speaking, we're probably looking at 9 or 10 under, I would guess, to win this golf tournament. Is this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the place that Rahm got like the craziest 2-shot penalty ever for nobody even remembers why? Wasn't that here like a few years back? He got some random 2-shot penalty.
Yeah, it was on the par 3, like long and left in the rough. I can't remember exactly what happened.
But I think he ended up
still winning. There's been a lot of like wild stuff that's happened at this golf course.
Yeah, and I wish Matsuyama always played good here, but I don't really know if he's healthy or what to think about him. There's so much intriguing. I know one thing. Maybe let's kind of retract a little bit. Let's go into let's talk about Grillo winning this week. 7 years since he won. I know we'd like to touch on that. I would like to touch on the fact that, does Adam Schenk have the chipping yips? He's using putter from places that nobody else in the field would use putter from.
Yeah. Yeah. So
fairly successfully.
Grillo's win is so cool, in large part because of how long it's been, but also in the sense that, like, you can believe in his talent. You could have thought that he was a good fit for this golf course. You never in a million years would have guessed that he would have won in the way he did. He was neutral off the tee, typically one of his strengths. He was great with his irons, which you can predict, kind of predictably neutral to a little bit below average around the green, and then almost gained 2 strokes per round putting. Certainly, if you were banking or if you were playing Grillo or even had a bet on Grillo, you thought if he can just make a few putts, maybe the ball striking is good enough that will carry him to a victory or to a high finish. I don't think you expected Yeah, he'd be like pretty good everywhere else and then would just dominate everybody on the greens. So crazy the way he did it. And you could kind of see just the confidence that he had on the greens on Sunday. And man, like even the putt he missed on the first playoff hole looked damn good the whole way.
But he got an awfully good bounce off the
Incredible
tee.
bounces.
Off the tee, like that shot on in the playoff, like they hit
Yeah.
on that right hill. So I've played there a bunch. And I've hit like that's it. It's kind of like a vacuum. It sucks you into hitting it right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen so many balls stay on that side hill in the rough right there. It's incredible. And especially working back into the hill, like that could have stayed up there really easy. And then, Shank hit a perfect tee shot.
Yep.
I tell you what, after the golf tournament, I mean, obviously, what he shoot a couple over to get into the playoff, I think. I mean, everybody went backwards on Sunday. And then I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but you need to. Like, he is a great follow and just body bagging people left and right about the one guy talking about how he went backwards and how does he shoot 2 or 3 over, whatever. And he's talking about he was so tired from his mom the night before and just like body bagging.
That one's made the rounds on Twitter this morning.
Like
and for people who don't follow him, like they don't realize that's like just an average week for him on Twitter.
He's greatness. Like, and I mean, he's one of those guys that you want more personalities like him on tour, and him to win and stuff is really cool. But yeah, it was fun.
I think another like major story was Scottie Scheffler, because yet another event where he just dominates in every aspect tee to green. He gained almost half a stroke or almost a stroke and a half per round off the tee, over a stroke and a half per round with his irons, over half a stroke per round around the green, and then lost over a stroke per round putting. Like you look at the top 5 on the leaderboard, and you see plus 1.9 putting per round, plus 1.3 from Schenk, plus 1.9 from Hall, plus 1.5 from Haley, and then Scheffler minus 1.1. Like for him to be that close to a win, putting that poorly, it speaks to how insanely good he is tee to green, but it's now a pretty consistent struggle for him on the green. So how confident can we be that Scotty's going to figure it out enough on the greens that now he can, beat Rahm on day 4 and not Grillo and Schenk?
What he does tee to green is absolutely incredible, because it doesn't matter what golf course it is on. It doesn't matter if it's easy, hard, firm or soft, long or short. He just does it week in and week out. And it's one of the most amazing things in golf you could ever imagine, because it doesn't seem like there's ever a lapse, right? There's never like this random out of contention week, especially like I know he competes a lot and plays good in elevated events, but like non-elevated events, it's pretty easy to be like, like I've played a lot of weeks in a row. I'm here because of the sponsors. And, you just go ho-hum your way to a 40th place finish. He doesn't do that. He contended in the Nelson. He contended in the Colonial. Like it doesn't matter to him. He just goes out and plays golf. And he keeps reiterating, I love what I'm working on. I love what I'm working on. Like he doesn't even feel like he's there yet. So, I mean, it's encouraging stuff. I mean, to be the number 1 player in the world and be so humble and yet still trying to get so much better is really impressive.
We're going to get into a lot of like mid-iron stuff when we start talking about the course fit for the Memorial. But to a point that you just made, that like Scotty is good in every way and he continues to have this kind of ball striking prowess regardless of the type of course, it shows up in the data too. There is not a single aspect of his ball striking that isn't phenomenal. He's long off the tee. He might be the most accurate in the world off the tee at this point, gaining 0.64 strokes per round with driving accuracy alone. Obviously one of the best approach players in the world, but even that is kind of consistent throughout the bag. He's one of the best half wedge players. He's one of the best wedge players. He's one of the best mid-iron players, and he's one of the best long iron players. So it's just incredible how well-rounded his ball striking is. And then you can also say like it extends all the way through tee to green, because his around the green play, his short game has become one of the best in the world as well. I think I could only confidently put JT, Hideki Matsuyama, and Cam Smith above him right now. Maybe Spieth too, but it's a very short list for guys who are definitively better around the green than Scotty Scheffler is.
And if he had I want you to look at it this way too. Like if he had a loud personality, how popular would he be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people,
Mhm.
I don't think people undervalue that, but he doesn't have, I wouldn't even call Rory when he got into, that top tier as being loud personality. Now he's very outspoken to this second, but in general, like Scheffler is just a quiet, go about his business person. If he was a loud personality, he'd be all over the media and all over every talk show and all that. It's just not the way that he works. So I think that he gets discarded a little bit on his pure ability by the fact that he just is a different personality type. He just, he's just a hang out, go with the flow. I'm going to keep getting better person. So, what he's doing on the golf course is so good. And I don't think people have quite gathered how good it really is.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. And I think like it's almost to the point now where we're going to see one of two paths forward for him. Either he's going to figure out the putting and this ball striking just insanity is going to continue and he's going to start winning in chunks again, or the struggles on the green are going to start to seep into his long game, and maybe that sudden like ball striking dominance becomes just a pretty good player tee to green that he's then going to have to figure out what's going on with the putter, because we saw a very similar thing with Spieth. I think like when Spieth was in his prime, people think back to it and they think, oh, he just made like every 15 to 20 footer and just dominated on the greens. Spieth was dominant in every aspect, just like Scheffler has been, where, yeah, he made a ton of putts, but he was also one of the best short game players in the world, still is. And his driving was great, and his iron play was spectacular when he was in his prime. Specifically, like he was probably the best in the world at consistently hitting the ball pin high once Tiger wasn't playing as often anymore. So, with Spieth, like very clearly, once he started to struggle with the putter, maybe it's just a kind of a result of spending more time practicing with the putter, less time with the ball striking. But whatever the case is, we've seen it time and time again with players historically. When they really, really struggle with the putter over a sustained amount of time, those struggles can seep into the long game. It's kind of a race for Scotty between, does he figure that out first, or do the struggles kind of lead into the rest of his game first? And only time will tell.
From what his comments were, he's saying all the right things, like it's not bothering him. And and he might be young enough that it really isn't bothering him. I mean, he was like, I love the way it's coming off my blade. I love the way that that it's rolling. And there's some adjustment to be made. I don't know what changes he made, and maybe he went from a certain one style to another, or a certain mindset to another. But his comments sure seem to be on par with doing nothing but getting better throughout the year.
Yeah, and he's also talked about like feeling like he's actually making good putting strokes. His speed seems pretty good, and they're just not going in. Like he made the comment that it just seems to him like the hole has shrunk. So
he said it was moving today. He said yesterday afternoon, he said, yeah, it felt like the hole was moving on me. Like he's like the hole's bouncing around.
Which I don't know about I don't know like what you think when you hear that. I hear that and I think there's an alignment issue, that like he thinks he's starting the ball right edge. He thinks he's aligned right edge, and he's actually, 2 inches outside the hole or something like that.
And it's funny because I worked with Cameron McCormick forever, like multiple years, when Spieth was still there, and obviously still with Cameron to this day. But he had me go get my eyes checked because I would hit putts and I'd be like, yeah, it's right where I'm looking. Look how good it's striping. And it would miss, high lip. And he's like, well, that's because it's not starting where you're looking. And so I spent, I don't even know how many, 3 hours or something at some specialty optometrist getting my eyes checked. And when I left, the guy was like, yeah, your eyes aren't perfect, but I can't help you with the problem. And I was like,
that's funny. I remember I worked with my coach one time, and I was thinking that my putts were starting like inside right, and they were at the left edge, and I was just seeing like that crooked. And so for me, it was like I would see a putt in my mind that I thought was moving like half a ball right to left, and in actuality, it was going the other way. And it was just like in my mind, it was so wrong. And so, yeah, it's kind of insane. I don't think people who haven't done a deep dive into their own putting have any concept of just how screwed up you can be with the way you're seeing the ball roll and where you think you're starting the ball versus where you're actually starting the ball.
Yeah, it's in the variables. Like you can drop it down a ramp from 10 feet and know the perfect line and speed and still only like 7 go in. You know, it's just like it's pretty crazy if you really get really in depth with it.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into some of the Muirfield Village stuff, the Memorial Course Fit. This is probably my favorite event of the year. It holds a very special place in my heart. Let's go back to 2020 for a second. Jon Rahm wins, but on the very last hole, Matt Wallace, of all people, sinks like a 20-foot putt for birdie on a day, if you recall, like that was the year post-COVID where they had just played like 3 weeks prior at Muirfield Village 2. It played much easier than they wanted, so they made it as tough as possible for the Memorial. And Matt Wallace's 20-foot birdie putt on the last hole gives me a $40,000 win. Still to this day is my biggest DFS win. So this place really, really near and dear to my heart. Hopefully we can get more of the same this week. But I will say, like, it doesn't seem to totally be a coincidence that we would find so much success here, because this course fit model, as you can now see on the screen, is extremely kind of favorable for us. Number one, you see this like pretty big weight on strokes gained driving accuracy, over 20%. You know, that's 20% to a statistic that nobody else has access to. Oh, that's an FTN exclusive piece of data. So we love that. Approach play, pretty strong here. Around the green play is boosted like crazy. This is one of the highest weights we will see all year for short games. And then there's this hidden aspect of almost all of that 25% weight to approach play is to mid irons specifically, 150 to 200 yards. So we have like all these different layers of why this course fit model is advantageous to us. And it just so happens to be one of the 2 most powerful and most reliable models of the year, TPC Sawgrass for the Players Championship being the other. So we like it's one of the best models just in terms of predictive value. And then it also happens to be really unique in a way that furthers our advantage.
So I'm going to go like kind of correlate this into last week's conversation of where I kind of thought that the driving accuracy wasn't as big a deal, whereas, you know, the model pointed that way big time because so many people hit 3 woods irons and stuff off the tee. I feel like this week the driving accuracy model is super valuable because you don't see as many layup shots. So like, you know, people whereas like last week you would have like the shorter guys hitting 3 wood and the longer guys hitting 4 iron to the same area. You don't see that this week. People are still going to be hitting driver. So now who hits their driver the straightest becomes more important. I don't know if that makes sense, if you kind of follow what I'm saying there, but
yeah, I think to a larger degree, I'm in agreement with you. I think there also is an aspect of that where it's still predictive. Like this is a predictive metric, not a descriptive one. So it very well can be saying, hey, one of the reasons why this guy is so accurate off the tee is because he has the length and the smarts to say, I don't need that distance on this hole. Let me use my long iron instead, which is going to make him much more likely to not just hit the fairway, because fairways hit isn't what this metric is really telling us about, but it's, you know, he's going to put himself in the best position off the tee. And maybe even most importantly, he's going to avoid whatever danger lurks on the hole. So maybe he's hitting 3 iron to take a water completely out of play, or to take a killer, you know, fairway bunker completely out of play. So whatever the case may be, I do think it is being captured by this model and by this strokes gained driving accuracy metric. But your point is well taken that certainly there's no doubt that a week like this where most guys are hitting driver, that's when it's going to be most predictive, especially when the course fit model tells us exactly that.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see guys that really are going to shine by driving it in the fairway and not just hitting it far, right? So you like, but now you're not going to get so many people that are like, oh, it doesn't matter where I hit it. I'm just going to hit a 4-iron type of deal. So I love this place. I think the other thing about it is it's strokes gained around the green, but it's a different kind of around the green than let's say Florida. You know, it's we're not tight lie into the grain, like worry about chunking it. We're more like, are you going to chip it in the leather or chip it to 20 feet type of shots? I haven't seen anything yet on the rough. Stay tuned to that. You know, is it going to be all bunker shots all the way around because this gets, you know, thick and wet, or, you know, are they going to play it at the medium length? I know one of the things that made Colonial really challenging is their first cut of rough. It kind of like sat up a little.
Yeah.
And all the guys were high facing it, and it wasn't going far enough. And then when it did go far enough, it wasn't spinning enough, so it kind of bounded over the green. A lot of people think that high rough is auto, like that's way harder. Sometimes you can get that medium length, you know, where you got to control a flyer or make sure you don't high face it, and that makes it more difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that.
Especially when the rough is already really thick. As long as it's thick, it's going to be difficult because, then you either have the really long rough that it's going to just be tough advancing the ball, or it's shorter than that and it's just tough to control exactly how it comes out and tough to predict how it's going to come out. Because sometimes it's not just about how well you control it, it's how well you gauge the lie.
Right.
There's one other aspect of the course fit model that I want to point to. We see that strokes gained driving distance is less predictive here than usual. And one thing that I want to kind of drive home is we've talked about this concept quite a bit, that what this could be telling us is not necessarily that, hey, distance is not going to be advantageous. It could just be accuracy is so much more important than distance, that distance is only useful when it's also coming with accuracy. So someone like Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Cameron Young, Rory McIlroy, those guys, it's not necessarily that they're not going to be able to take advantage of their distance as much as they usually do. It's that the guys who rely on distance to gain strokes off the tee, guys like, let's take a quick look here, like Adam Scott or Sam Burns, Justin Thomas, Ryan Fox, Patrick Rogers, those types of players maybe are going to have a much tougher time gaining off the tee because you can't do so through length alone. You have to have accuracy. But when you have accuracy, that distance can still be really advantageous to you.
Yeah, Cameron Davis, Cameron Champ. I mean, there's a lot of names that Min Woo Lee, you know, that kind of fit into that. Where 100%. if you can line up one of those guys that does happen to hit it in the fairway this week, sure looks like you got a huge advantage. Similar to, you know, just like we talked about, you mentioned the players where, you know, where I talked about Min Woo Lee, like the same thing this week. If he could happen to have one of those weeks where he does drive it in the fairway a lot, he's got the talent and that length advantage to really take advantage of it, but he has to hit his ball in the fairway this week.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk about some course fit specialists. Does anyone immediately stand out to you based on that course fit discussion as someone who could really be in for a big week?
So the guy that we left off last week immediately comes to mind. I don't know. I haven't seen any of your course fit stuff, but Siwoo, I know like mid-iron play is really, really good. So I would think that he's going to play good. I already mentioned Alex Smalley. I think that he has a good week this week. I think he's way underpriced. You know, outside of that, like you have to consider Morikawa. He like it seems like his bad weeks he finishes like 30th, right? I mean, nobody's really giving him credit for how good he is, and he's a great mid-iron player. You know, those are the kind of the first three that kind of jumped off the board to me. I really want to get behind Justin Thomas at his price range on DK just because his struggle has been in his wedge play, and he's not going to have a ton of wedges this week. You know, you mentioned he's obviously not overly accurate off the tee and relies a little bit more on length, but it's just one of those weeks where I feel like he could really, really pop. Outside of that, like that's kind of my bases have started. I mean, you know, I'm a big X fan here as well. I think he's due to win at some point here really soon. But I mean, you know, it's pretty hard for me to, when I feel like I've got an advantage at Smalley at 6,800, to just not start every lineup Smalley, Siwoo, Scheffler with the way they're playing and just build from there.
Yeah, we'll get into some different types of builds, but I want to talk about Siwoo Kim. To no one's surprise, once again, but you kind of nailed it. Like he does three things far better than most golfers in the world. He is extremely accurate off the tee. He has a phenomenal short game, and while the rest of his iron play is average to mess somewhere in that, his mid iron play is pretty spectacular. So one of the best mid iron players in the world, one of the best short game players in the world, and one of the most accurate off the tee in the world. This place is kind of tailor made for Siwoo Kim. We've been on him all year long. I'm a little bit disappointed to see his odds. Let's use the prop shop and figure out exactly where he is. I saw he was 55-1 on Bet Rivers. I don't think I'm biting on that. 66-1 at PointsBet, 65-1 at Caesars and FanDuel. Maybe we'll do something like that. But I really, really wanted those placement points for him too. If he was 60 or above, it would have been pretty automatic for him with placement points. At 55, we still might get there. We will have to wait and see exactly how we feel about everything else. But yeah, I think Siwoo Kim is a fantastic place to start. And actually, that whole price range has a number of really strong plays. I think Russell Henley is one of the best fits, and Keegan Bradley as well. And Henley and Bradley may be like as correlated as any players on tour because their skill sets are so similar. You know, they both gain a bunch with accuracy off the tee. They are spectacular iron players, and both are really, really underrated when it comes to their short games. Both have kind of, turned maybe what was a weakness or at least something that they weren't gaining with early on in their careers into a real strength in their games. And then, of course, both not the greatest putters. So I think that both of them are spectacular values this week from a DFS perspective. I'm certainly going to give both a look in the outright market. I will say Keegan is always much more intriguing to me in the outright market because of his high volatility, where you know that if he's on, he has the ceiling to compete with the best in the world. But I kind of think like that's just a phenomenal starting point to DFS lineups and just to understanding course fit, because we always talk about like trying to find course fit specialists. It's always worth noting you're much more likely to find a specialist down below, because when you talk about a specialist, you're talking about somebody who projects far better at this course than they would at an average course. The best players in the world are going to project well at any course, so it's hard to say they project significantly better at any one than others, unless they have very severe skill sets like a Cameron Young or something like that. But I think that kind of trio, Siwoo, Henley, Keegan, you're going to hear me talk about all three of them quite a bit this week.
So another one that I want to mention right there that I want to try to get ahead of the game on, so to speak, that we talk about a lot is Tom Kim. I think that he can play really good here as well. I know he's regressed a little bit here compared to what we saw right out of the chute, but a place where distance doesn't really matter. And I think that I know he hasn't played his best as of late, but, if we can kind of get him back into that correct mindset of who he is and what he's going to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's just too inexpensive for how good his good really is, right? I mean, there was a point where we thought he was a lock to be elite, right? I mean, if we would have talked about this 8 months ago, we would have had him at 9,500 plus, right? He's at 7,900. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those deals. We know he's got it in him. I think he kind of got out there, had that success, regressed a little bit, and just hoping that I can be ahead of the curve to get back on him. And so like I said, I know it's not a data thing, so to speak, because of the way he's played recently, but I just think that his game fits for this place, and I think that he can compete.
Where we can point to data being supportive of this call is also in the fact that he has certainly, in his very short time on tour, proven that he has the skill of knowing how to win. And so if he puts himself in contention, he can certainly get it done. Makes him a phenomenal GPP play, which I think you're obviously leaning towards anyway when you're talking about Tom Kim. So I like that call quite a bit. Moving up the board, you kind of alluded to it earlier. Hideki Matsuyama is a really, really strong fit for this golf course. The only real question for him is health, but the short game, if not the best in the world, certainly top 3, top 5, something of that nature. Really strong irons. I wish that more of his iron prowess was coming from the mid iron. So maybe that's one hiccup. It's mostly like the half wedges and the full wedges. But still, certainly, like he's no slouch with the mid iron. So you can definitely go to Hideki here. I think my lean there is going to be what's his ownership? Are people afraid of him because of the injury concerns, and you're getting Hideki at like 5% is a phenomenal fit? Then I'll be all over it. If so many people are saying, he's had success here and he is a good fit for this golf course, and suddenly Hideki is going to be like 15%, now I'll go elsewhere. But so much to talk about kind of at the top of this board too, which we can get into now. I think the very first discussion worth having is Scotty versus Rahm. What are our thoughts there?
I mean, see, like I think this is an ownership thing, right? Like who are we going to get at a lower ownership? Who are people more likely to pay up for? I mean, I love the way what I get sucked in by the conversations of what Scheffler says, because he's saying all the things he's supposed to say. And I don't think he's getting coached to say those things. I think that's what he believes. So I think that's why I really like what he's doing and what he's saying, and in the way he's striking the golf ball and the way he's talking about his putting. That being said, I know that Rahm can win here. He loves this place. He's played good here. I think it's going to be an ownership deal. I'm going to lean Scheffler personally, but that's just but I can't make an argument him over Rahm.
Yeah, I think, man, this is such an interesting discussion, because there are really strong like indicators pointing to each. So from a course fit expected strokes gain perspective, Scotty Scheffler is kind of far ahead of Rahm, and the projections at 2.38 to 2.04 for Rahm. That's quite a bit of separation at the top. Where I kind of lean Rahm is that I don't think that projection is doing a good enough job of kind of weighing mid-iron play. And while Rahm is only a little bit better with his mid-irons than Scotty, we've talked about it already this episode. Scotty is phenomenal throughout the bag with his irons. Rahm is not. Rahm's wedge play is only a little bit above average relative to the tour. He's absolutely incredible with his mid-irons, probably the best mid-iron player in the world, very good with his long irons, and then just does the rest with the putter and with his spectacular driving. So if we're going to say that this course really emphasizes mid-irons and de-emphasizes wedge play, which I'm not necessarily sure that it does, but if we were to take that route, then suddenly that emphasis on the mid-irons becomes a huge point in Rahm's favor versus Scotty's. I also think off the tee, they are almost identical. Rahm's a little bit longer. Scotty's a little bit more accurate right now. Their strokes gained approach, 0.87 per round for Scheffler, 0.86 for Rahm. Like, there is so little separation there. Scotty, maybe a better short game, Rahm, a better putter. I kind of think that the decision really just comes down to number one. Do you have faith in Scotty's ability to bounce back with the putter? If you do, maybe you go to him. If you don't, you stick to Rahm. And then, of course, what will ownership look like? Because at this point in time, I don't have a good read about what the public's going to want it to do between those two guys. If we end up seeing that one is 10%, one is 20%, then it's pretty automatic. I think you just go to the guy who's 10.
Yeah, no doubt. And the other thing about, like, Rahm drives it so good. He hits so many more wedges than the rest of the field. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such a weird, like, it's such a hard value of, right? Like, what's, mid irons are what we're going to talk about. Well, a mid iron for me, like, when I think of mid iron, I think of 5, 6, 7 iron, maybe include 8 in that.
I would include 9 and 8.
But in general, like, I hit a 9 iron 148. That's a wedge for Rahm and Scheffler. So, like, are we yardage, or are we talking about what iron we're hitting, right? So
we're talking about the bucket of 150 to 200 yards.
Right. And I would argue that Rahm, Scheffler, most of those guys, stock yardage, they're probably hitting a wedge from 150. Mm-hmm. I mean, but they also have a lot less opportunities from, was it Dustin Johnson? I hit 1 6-iron into any par 4, and that was one time in an entire season, and everything else was a 7-iron or less. Like, That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even talk about doing that around my home golf course, let alone in a PGA Tour event for a whole season. So, like, a little bit of that skewed. And I think, Rahm gets less chances with mid irons. I think he is that elite with a mid iron, but I just don't think he's going to have enough of them to matter.
Yeah, that could be the case. I also think that, like, this golf course, the par threes,
Yeah,
in
that's the
particular,
biggest.
yeah, I mean, you no matter who you are, you're going to get a lot of mid irons, and that's why the mid iron signal is so incredibly high. But let's go down a little bit. I think one of the more interesting ranges, Rory, Cantlay, Schauffele, Morikawa, Hovland kind of picking up his play of late. What's your lean here? Because the guy that I want to start with is Cantlay. Obviously has phenomenal history here, and he's second in the course fit expected strokes gained projection, in large part because he's as accurate off the tee as Scotty and Rahm. His short game is nearly as good as Scotty's, better than Rahm's. The mid irons for Cantlay, I think, are the biggest concern for me. And if your immediate thought is, well, why would that concern you for him when he has had so much success here? The answer is that historically he's been a much mid iron player than he has been this year, than he has been over the last 12 months. You can kind of like just see this general progression in his mid iron play going down. His long iron play has improved. His wedge play is just as good, but suddenly his mid irons are well below the guys around him. He has a clear disadvantage in the mid iron game relative to Scotty, to Rahm, Rory, Schauffele, Morikawa, Hovland, JT. All of these guys have a very definitive edge over him with mid iron play. Is that a concern for you, or do you kind of think the rest of his game is not only strong enough in general, but especially strong for Muirfield Village, that it just doesn't matter if he's going to lose a little bit from 150 to 200 yards?
I hope that data is used throughout the 200 single, and so that I can get him a super low ownership, because
I have bad news for you. I'm pretty sure he's going to be quite popular.
So I'm hoping that he gets overlooked. I really do. I'm not sure that he will, because of his course history. There's so many course history people, which will move me off of him completely. Like, I have no problem going away from him. He is like, and I'm not an ownership person, generally speaking. He is one guy in this golf tournament that is, my involvement will strictly be based on ownership.
I think I'm taking the exact same approach there. Would it be just kind of a direct pivot to you, either to Rory or Schauffele or Morikawa?
See, I love going. I'm hoping that people see Morikawa, like all the Morikawa bashing, to get away from him, because I think that, like, he's silently working on things and getting better and improving, and he's still really competitive. And I obviously I'm a huge X fan as well here, but I just think Morikawa, once again, like, one of those guys I feel like really could get overlooked this weekend. That all the signs, hitting all those 7 irons and 6 irons really could make him stand out.
He is definitely improving around the green, by the way. Like, historically, that was certainly a major concern of his. Not necessarily to the degree that it was with Hovland, but whereas Hovland, like, just had the one weakness around the green play, Morikawa had 2, putting and around the green play. Now it seems like Hovland's still struggling around the green, Morikawa struggling with the putter, but the around the green struggles may be ancient history now for Morikawa. So that much is very intriguing for his perspective.
And these greens too have quite a bit of undulation, and where they put the pins and stuff, and a lot of big breakers. And I tend to lean to not so good putters on courses like this, because you don't, like, your really good putters are going to show up a week like last week, where the greens are good, firm, fast, but there's not huge undulation and breaks to it. Whereas this week, I think you'll see a lot more big breakers, where you got to kind of feel it in type of putts, where I think Morikawa might be a little bit better off and can get closer to the field in that instance.
I wish Taylor Moore knew that last week. He should have put it a lot better than he did, for the exact reasons you just mentioned. But let's go down the board a little bit more again. I think one of the more interesting ranges is going to be this, like, JT and below, maybe even include Hatton here, 93. You can even throw Day in there, 9,400 to the mid to upper 8,000s. There's a lot of win equity in this range. And then there are also a lot of guys who don't necessarily win very often, but they're consistently like near the top of leaderboards. So are you going to like the super consistent Tyrrell Hatton, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sung Jae Im type of player, or are you leaning towards the win equity, Sam Burns, Justin Thomas, that kind of player in this range?
So a lot of that's going to depend on my build of what I'm trying to do, whether it's a 3 max or a single entry and what I'm trying to accomplish. Is there an ownership low enough for you to get behind playing Sung Jae Im this week? Like, is there like if you said he's going to be 3% at 9,100, would you play him? If I told you right now he's 3% at 9,100, would you play him?
I think so, because we know how accurate he is off the tee. We know he has a strong short game, good putter. He checks every box. The one that's a little bit concerning is he's another guy who his long iron play is so much better than his mid irons, that this emphasis on mid irons and de-emphasis on long irons certainly hurts him. Maybe what I would say is, even at low ownership, it doesn't really do that much for me because I don't necessarily believe in his ceiling. So, to really take advantage of 3% ownership, you have to have a real ceiling, because otherwise, if he finishes, let's say 5th through 10th, that's only benefiting you if the guys that you're pivoting off of aren't also finishing 5th through 10th. So you want that ceiling of somebody who can go out there and win at a decent probability. I'm not sure that Sung Jae is that guy.
Well, and he's just, just watching his mannerisms and stuff, he's struggling right now. Like, he's just, he's kind of out of sorts in general, and you can just kind of see it. And it was disappointing when pricing came out, because I was like, man, like, people are going to overlook him if I can get him in like the 8,000, 8,200. Like, I really thought, but then when the pricing came out, I just didn't understand, because I think he'd be low owned at 8,000. I think you could switch Siwoo and Sung Jae and their ownership would be the same. I just don't think that anybody can get behind him. So that's why I was I could see him being in the 200 single. I could see him being sub 5 pretty easily.
I could see that, especially, people love to look at recent iron play, and his irons have been a disaster in the last 2 events. Only 4 rounds played because he missed both cuts, but they've been a complete disaster. So certainly wouldn't be shocking if people avoid him. Man, I was just about to ask you about Max Homa. It looks like he's not in this field, so guess we're not asking about Homa.
Fitzpatrick's another good one there too.
What'd you say?
Fitzpatrick's another good one right there too. Trending everything says trending the right direction. Kind of throw out the team event with his brother, but outside of that, like, he's an interesting fit right here in what we're talking about. And looking back to where he won, play a layup golf course where he hit a lot of mid irons into. I don't know if they all fit into the mid iron category, but it was not like drive it up by the green type of golf course. So, he's an interesting spot here. I know you're a big Cam Young believer. I know he drives it super well. I just, he's another one I don't know what to do with in this situation. It's an interesting range.
Cam Young is once again one of the absolute best in the world when it comes to birdie rate over expectation. So I think my path with him will probably be play him and show it, fade him on the main slate. But we'll see what ownership looks like. It could kind of go either way for me on main slate for him. If he's low enough, I could end up playing him. If there's any ownership whatsoever, I think I'd rather fade him on the main slate right now. What's your take on Corey Connors? Because there's an aspect of his game, almost like Morikawa, that is really, really trending well. And that's after a couple really poor outings when it comes to his short game, he's gained half a stroke per round in each of the last 2 events, the Wells Fargo and the PGA Championship. So it's not just that he's gained around the green, but I feel like those are similar tests of golf where, these are difficult golf courses. A lot of the emphasis on short game is about saving pars and not about scoring, making birdies on par 5s and short par 4s, that sort of thing. And obviously, like the accuracy off the tee, the iron play, all really in Connor's favor. What's your take on him this week?
I'm a big Corey Connors fan this week, and I love the translation from the PGA to here. You get similar grass types. You get a lot of stuff that are really similar as far as difficulty and the way it's going to play. And I think that the way that he played there and the composure he showed, I think translates this week. And I think Corey Connors is one of those dudes that's really ready for the big stage.
Yeah.
So I think we can, as popular as he is, I think we can still be ahead of the curve on him going forward.
It's also so interesting. He's one of the higher volatility players on tour at this point, and I don't think anyone would have guessed that. You kind of think of Connors and you just think of this steady guy, doesn't putt well enough to contend, but is always around because of his ball striking. That's really not what the data says. So maybe the play with him is to kind of play the ownership game. If he's anywhere near as contrarian as he was for the PGA Championship, auto play, and if everyone's kind of chasing that result, then it's an auto fade and you go down to Siwoo, Henley, Keegan instead. So I think that range is probably the most straightforward to me, where you have like this great handful of players that I'm super confident about, and it's then really easy to just play the ownership game with the four of them or something like that.
And I think his volatility is so high because he's not a guy that can hit it bad and grind it out and make the cut on the number. You know, he just doesn't have that, like, I'm going to go out there and make 10 6-footers for par in one round and, you know, turn a 74 into a 68. You know, does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I think there's also an element of he does hit the ball so consistently well that he can be a high volatile player in general, just because his volatility is basically the volatility in his around the green play and putting. So because he is very streaky with the putter, you know, we just saw him have a great week at the PGA Championship, 1.3 strokes gained per round with the putter. You know, he lost 1.3 at the Masters per round with the putter. So he can be highly volatile, even though the ball striking is super consistent.
And I thought it was weird that they threw Fowler and Theegala right in the middle of that range. Like that was a really like interesting add-on to me by DraftKings of throwing them in there. I think they put Fowler in there because of his popularity in general. I think that's nothing more. I think that they do that. I think that's where they mess up a lot, is they're like, oh, this guy's going to get played a lot because everybody likes him, which may or may not happen. But
yeah, he's almost like Siwoo Kim in the way that he is great around the greens and great with his mid irons, much better with the mid irons than the long irons or the wedge play. So there's that. Where he differs from Siwoo Kim is Siwoo is as accurate as it gets off the tee, and Ricky Fowler is not. Fowler is consistently losing strokes with his accuracy off the tee. But he's another guy that, like, if you can promise me he's going to be 3%, I'm going to have some interest. But I think that would be a bit of a surprise. He's been pretty consistently 10% and above.
Well, I mean, the thing that I compare it to is, like, do you want Fowler 8,500 or Gary Woodland 7,700? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not. It just doesn't seem like, if you switch those two, I think it would change their ownership almost zero.
Yeah.
For what we have going and the course fit and everything that you have going, it just doesn't make much sense. Siwoo and Ricky, like all those guys, like Ricky could be moved down and still have about the same ownership. So it's just a weird ad in that random group. I mean, I think Gary Woodland with a 7-iron has to be in the top 10% on the tour. I mean, this is not looking at data. I'm just going by what I know.
His mid-iron play is extremely strong. His long iron play is amongst the absolute best in the world, and then his wedge play is really bad. Like really, really bad. So
I mean, like, and once again, we get him on a course where when he does have wedges, they're going to be off a lot easier lies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is why, like, I know Justin Thomas hasn't driven it great lately, but if he can figure it out in that price range that he's in and being really low owned, like, you have a lot easier lies, you have a lot more mid irons. That's what they do good. And then, you know, get the putter going and they're going to contend. That, you know, it's just, yeah, it's one of those deals where you just can throw some of these guys out. And the problem is, you know, you get those first click guys. Like, what are we going to fight Woodland ownership up to 20%, probably 25% in the single entry stuff?
I'm not sure. Based on the fact that he missed as Mega Chalk at the PGA Championship, which in hindsight, like, what were we thinking playing Gary Woodland at 25% when we had so many really strong plays like Keegan and Connors being 5% in single entries for $500 more? Why were we playing 25% Gary Woodland? But to your point, like, I don't know what he's going to be this week, and I also think there's a really interesting divide here where once you get below Keegan, the projections overall really drop off. Woodland certainly has the mid iron play, but he doesn't have the short game. So I'm not hugely into Gary this week. I do think that he kind of fits the bill as somebody who's maybe being underestimated by the course fit expected strokes gain model. Number one, because it's not weighing his mid iron prowess enough. But number two, because as we said earlier, it's not that distance can't be helpful. It's just that you have to have accuracy as well. Well, Gary's gaining over a quarter of a stroke per round with his driving accuracy. So certainly he qualifies as somebody who can still then really benefit from his distance. So I think he's better than projections, than my projections, I should say. But I'm not sure I want to get to him. The two guys who project well in the mid to low sevens, Matt Kuchar and Chris Kirk, both really poor mid-iron players. So I don't really trust those projections. I got to say, I think that I'm just going to let my lineup bottom out at Keegan at 7,800, just being extremely balanced this week. What do you think of that approach?
I mean, I can get behind that. I think there's just there's some intriguing names. Like, I agree, where you're throwing out those, that one group. Man, like Power at 7,100 is really intriguing to me because of how he can play. Davis Riley at 6,900 is really intriguing to me. Well, I've already said Alex Smalley 6,800 is way too cheap for where he should be. He should be the guy that we're talking about in the 7,500 range because he's a great mid-iron player. I've seen it in person. He is a really, and he's going to have a lot of them. I just think I agree with you skipping them. I will not be afraid. If I'm going to pay up for Rahm or Scheffler, I have no problem putting a Smalley in the lineup.
I think the two guys who stand out to me are Ben On at 7,400 and Smalley at 6,800. So if I am going to go down, I think it's probably for Smalley. So I'm certainly with you there. Your eyes told you the truth. Smalley's mid-iron play is easily his best approach bucket, and accurate off the tee, solid around the green. I'd like for him to be a better putter, but hey, if he was a better putter, he wouldn't be $1,600. So beggars can't be choosers down at this range.
So we're going to talk about it. What do you think of Sam Bennett, 6,300, 16th at the Masters, debut here? What do you? What? I mean,
I think that it's an unnecessary risk because when we look at the price structure for these elevated events, you have so many guys who typically would be mid eights to nines, like Henley, Keegan, Si Woo, Corey Connors, that because of how deep these fields are, they are forced down in the pricing to the mid to upper sevens, low eights. And there's a floor in the pricing for DraftKings. So if you were going to move everyone who's like mid to low sixes in the same way that you did these guys who are in the upper sevens, you'd end up with Sam Bennett at like 5,300. But of course, they don't do that. They don't change the range of their pricing. And so I think you get into this situation where, like, if you're using Bennett and let's say Morikawa or something like that, I think you're just far better off going to two of those upper seven, low eight guys because the difference between Morikawa and Russell Henley and Keegan Bradley is going to be much smaller than the difference between either of those guys and Sam Bennett.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just one of those deals. If you thought that Sam Bennett was the real deal, right? Mm-hmm. And if you thought he was going to immediately jump in and really compete, which I would argue that the Masters, you do hit quite a few mid-irons. I mean, like just as far as that goes, similar grass type, bent grass greens, a little bit different around the green. it's just an interesting aspect to look at of like what do we believe in him going forward. We've got a lot of guys like that in that price range though. I think Justin Sue is the same way. Back to Eric Cole, like I know he played really bad this week but should play good here, like at a pretty cheap price. So
Let's talk about some potential outrights, and then we will get out of here. I think the first one that stands out to me, Keegan Bradley, 100 to 1, available at FanDuel and PointsBet, also available at Caesars. Can also get him 80 to 1 with some placement points at Bet Rivers. How do you feel about Keegan's outright potential here, or is he just a little bit too unlikely to win? Where you would like to find like the best odds as the placement odds? Like if he was 100 to 1 at Bet Rivers, it would be an auto bet for me. I'd already have it done. Right now, I'm still kind of thinking through 100 to 1 as just the pure outright.
Yeah, the thing is, if he's got those guys beating his doors down, right? Scheffler, Rahm, Rory, like what's he gonna do? That's the way that I always look at it. Is whereas like a guy like Hovland, I know Hovland's a little bit higher graded, but like Hovland just doesn't care. He's just gonna do what he's gonna do, in his own world. But Keegan Bradley is in the top tier of talent alone. So when you can give a guy, I mean, I feel that way about Gary Woodland too. Like if their mind is right and things are going right, their talent is that good. And at 100 to 1, like it's hard to. It's kind of like, hey, I'm either in on this or I'm not, right?
Right. And we talked about this kind of collection of guys here. So they're all priced similarly on DraftKings. Like Keegan 100 to 1, Henley 70, Siwoo 66, and Connors 50. So one of those is not like the others. That 100 to 1 really stands out to me in the odds market, and it just so happens that Keegan is one of the most volatile in that group as well. So you can almost make the argument that he might be as likely as any of these four to actually go get the win.
Yeah, for sure. And if you got, it's pretty simple math, right? If you got one guy, they all project the same, and one is 100 to 1, the other one's 50 to 1. Like, which one are you going to play? Right. It doesn't always work out because golf is so volatile in general. But it just. You said Siwoo 66.
Yeah.
Which I'm surprised. That seems low.
It does, and he's only 55 to 1 where there are placement points at Bet Rivers. So as much as I love him, I kind of think I'm out on that, and I'll just make him a core play on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I haven't looked much into the outright market so far this week, just because it's so early and I don't have the ability to play places like you do, so it's a little bit different. Not much line shopping and moving for me.
Alex Smalley, 250 to 1 at Caesars, FanDuel, and PointsBet. Unfortunately, only 150 to 1 at Bet Rivers. If he was 250 to 1 at Bet Rivers, that would have been an auto bet. 150 to 1, I will have to think about that one as well. By the time that this show is released, by the way, I might already have picks in our tracker. So as you are listening to this, go ahead, hop on the tracker, see there. You can also just check the Discord. I always post and tag everybody in the Discord once I post an actual bet. So by the time you're watching this, maybe I'll have made these decisions. I might still be thinking about them though. Benny On is another interesting one. What would you guess On's odds are for this week?
I would bet he's in that 150 to 1 range.
It's 125 to 1. And this time the best available is on Bet Rivers with the placement points. So that is an interesting thought. And I always kind of feel better about his outright chances than I do a DFS perspective, because there's always just so much risk that he has one of those weeks where he's missing like every single 5-foot putt and it's just an auto missed cut because of it, no matter how well he strikes the ball. But then you kind of have the opposite where if he happens to be gaining half a stroke per round, the ball striking is good enough and the short game is spectacular. So he could kind of take the Matt Wallace approach from 2020 where even if he's not, hitting even if he's not hitting that many greens, if he's making birdies when he is hitting the greens and he's saving par from everywhere like Matt Wallace did, he could be at the top of the leaderboard come Sunday.
No doubt. And like you said, I worry about the times they just hit the eject button, they're just like, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. Like.
I don't see myself going to the top of the board this week because almost everybody seems priced up. Like I would not. Well, let me ask you, what would you guess Hideki is?
22.
Okay, you're guessing the other direction. I was guessing that he'd be like 50 to 60. He's only 40.
Well, I just know, like, so a lot of times the numbers are put out based on perspective and not reality, right? So
100%, yeah.
I think, like, I was just going off of, like, obviously playing the devil's advocate, a perspective of what he would be. I was just thinking it would be super low for I think 40 is probably about right. I can't, like, I wouldn't argue that number. Now, it doesn't give us as bettors any value, in my opinion.
Right. So the reason why I thought he was going to be a little bit higher is he's 50 to 1 to win the Open. He's 46 to 1 to win the US Open. I believe he was just 60 plus to win the PGA Championship. So I was maybe not expecting that, but I was hoping for that. 40 to 1, as you said, like I think that's taken the value out of it. There would have been value if he was higher. Now there's not, because I think it's just a fair price. I think they actually did a nice job pricing him.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and I know it's hard to say that about Vegas, but I think that 41 is like, that's probably about where he's supposed to be. What's Tom Kim?
Let's find out. He is 60.
See, that's too low too. Like that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they were really aggressive with that pricing tier. I will say one thing that we saw a lot at this time, almost exactly a year ago, was books would open with like this range really suppressed. They didn't want to get immediately hit hard by the 50 to 70 to 1 range. But then as the week progressed, all of a sudden it was like Tom Kim would go from 60 to 1 to 81, or Keegan would jump to 120 to 1. Siwoo is going to go from 66 to 80, something like that. So I think I'm really going to kind of preserve my bullets early on in this week and hope that some of these guys drop. If I do make a bet today, it's probably going to be Keegan at 100 to 1, thinking that he's probably a little bit more likely to fall down to 80 everywhere else than he is to go up. But I think everyone else, like as you said, my initial reaction is, I was expecting to get a better number there. So maybe in the end, we actually will, and patience will be rewarded. Anything else that you want to touch on this week?
Spieth mid-30s? Like, I could get behind a Spieth mid-30s bet. That would be the only one that I would think would be mispriced outside that.
40.
So, yeah, I could get behind
MGM.
So I could get behind 40 as Spieth for sure. Like that, I was just trying to think of who my head that Vegas could misprice, and I think that Spieth could be mispriced.
There's another really good angle here for Spieth, which is I think I am more convinced that the mid iron emphasis is coming at the expense of long irons than I am that it's coming that it's stealing signal, if you will, from wedge play. Spieth is really good with his wedges. Obviously, he's pretty good with his mid irons. He's quite bad with his long irons. So that mid iron emphasis is maybe as advantageous for him as it is almost anybody else in this field. So Spieth 40 to 1, I can get behind that. The only real concern for him is the driving accuracy. Let's see if there has been any sign of that improving from him.
Trusting his wrist, I think it will help that. Now that he's got a week in with the heavy rough and showed no signs. Like I said, it was more of a who could be mispriced, and he would probably was the top of my market there.
Here's a weird trend in his game. So first of all, to answer that question I just posed, he wasn't very accurate off the tee at the Charles Schwab, but he was spectacular off the tee in the PGA Championship. The weird trend is 3 consecutive events, negative or 0.7 strokes lost, 0.6 strokes lost, and 1.8 strokes lost per round with his short game in the last 3 events. Is that a trend that really scares you away from him, or do you kind of think, hey, it's an outright bet? All we need is for that to click for him. He's one of the best short game players in the world. We shouldn't expect that to continue.
Well, so I think a lot of it's going to come down to the firmness of the greens. So if we get softer greens, I'm going to be more inclined to play Spieth because he showed the firmness of the greens the last couple of weeks he struggled with. The other thing, the grass type is very different at Colonial. So the greens might both be bent, but the grass type around the greens, Bermuda compared there and so, and I think that's probably why you're getting 40-1. We know that that's maybe what he's doing now, but we know that's not the way that he plays golf. So, hopefully he's healthy, get a little bit more practice and a little bit more work. And a lot of times, like you'll see, I mean, I know I do this. I'll be like, hey, I struggled chipping today. It's the best part of my game.
Yeah.
Let me go. It takes me an hour, right? Let me go put my headphones in and chip for 45 minutes and I'll get it figured out.
Yeah, that's kind of my lean. I think it's troublesome enough for me that I would kind of steer away from him on DraftKings, which I don't think I was going to have much interest in him there anyway. But in the outright market, I don't really care about it. I think we're much more likely to see that trend reverse than for it to continue. So I'm in agreement with you there. I think that'll do it. Anything else for you?
No, man. I think this is basically after the Players. I think this is probably our 6th best golf tournament of the year. So it'll be fun to watch.
I absolutely love this place. I love this tournament. I was fortunate enough to go walk the course for the event. I want to say that was like 5-6 years ago, something like that. Dude, it is spectacular in person. It's one that I think every like golf fanatic in the world should put on their bucket list. The golf course is just unlike any other golf course that you can see.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty underrated outside of the golf world. So, yeah, no, it's a fun week. And like I said before, I'll probably be more involved in the Discord this week. I think, we talked about Eckroat and Walker in there a lot and stuff, and they both panned out. So, see what happens this week.
Do you have an Eckroat or Jimmy Walker call for this week?
I mean, Smalley is the one for me, and he's not quite as a deep lean as some of the other ones.
But it's an elevated event, so it still counts. You got to find someone. Yeah.
So
right.
that's it. I'll be around. I'll be a lot on him, but yeah, it'll be a good time. Hopefully, we can go back to TPC Craig Ranch days for the FTN people and.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful. Let's get some more takedowns. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.